she's about 40 pounds, but she's very compact.
Good afternoon. We'll open up a public hearing, the House Committee on Veterans and Emergency Preparedness today. Appreciate all in attendance. Today is February 21st. Our intent is to move a couple bills in the work session, but prior to having the work sessions on House Bill 2417 and House Bill 2421, we'll be going into a public hearing. So the first up on the public hearing, we'll open up a public hearing, House Bill 2086. Ms. Edwards?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, House Bill 2086 establishes one or more veteran-themed lottery games dedicated to veterans' education and economic development. It creates a Veterans Lottery Fund that's separate and distinct from the general fund. It would appropriate money from the Veterans Lottery Fund to the Department of Veteran Affairs continuously. It instructs the Oregon State Lottery Commission to record and account for the costs and net proceeds of the veteran-themed lottery games, and requires that commission to certify the net proceeds of veteran-themed lottery games to the Oregon Department of Administrative Services. It then directs DAS to allocate an amount equal to the net proceeds from the veteran-themed lottery game to the Administrative Services Economic Development Fund to the Veterans Lottery Fund. The veteran-themed lottery game will begin January 2nd, 2015.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. I appreciate that. And we'll call first to the dais, if we could, Cameron Smith and Paul Evans, if you will. And this is a team to be reckoned with for our veterans. And I appreciate you both being here. And also thank you, Paul Evans, for the books. We have Veteran Speak, written by you. And for those in the audience, called Veteran Speak, Introduction to the Language of Veterans, written by Paul Evans. And through Veteran Speak, Air Force veteran Paul Evans explores the history of reintegration of our nation's heroes. This thoughtful book gives insight to potential employers and everyday citizens into the training and psyche of today's military personnel. Appreciate the book. Thanks very much for the gift to the committee. And thanks for being here today. You're welcome to get started. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Matthews, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cameron Smith, Policy Advisor for Governor Kitzhaber on military, veterans, and emergency management. This bill on the Veterans Lottery concept came up last session, and I think has come up from long brainstorms even before in terms of some of the task force work that Paul helped lead. Great strengths and great weaknesses in terms of how we fund government with our lottery dollars. Governor Kitzhaber even has a lot of reservations about how heavily dependent we are upon the lottery, but has been supportive of this small and targeted approach. Right now, nothing prevents lottery from doing a veterans-themed ticket or a veterans-themed raffle, just like we do in terms of when U of O plays Oregon State for the Civil War and some of our other marketing initiatives. What is needed, though, is a mechanism that if we're going to use that hook of veterans on a scratch-it ticket or on a raffle game, that we would have a mechanism where those funds would come into the veterans community. So it's not looking at any constitutional change. It would still meet the sniff test of education and economic development, but it would be for this targeted population of our veterans. And why I think it's a real positive, whether lottery is not always the best investment for your own dollars. Whether or not it's entertainment or not, there is a war bond type dynamic around our veterans that I think, I don't play the lottery personally, but I know I'd be buying 10 raffle tickets or 10 scratch-its through the Oregon Lottery, knowing that most of those proceeds are going to get driven back into veterans education and veterans economic development, veterans employment. And it's a way to raise awareness. Right now, Washington State has just done it for their Veterans Innovations Program. They start on November 11th, run their raffle through the end of the year, and it just raises awareness for what our veterans and our military families are facing. Hard to say, I don't know if there's been any estimates in terms of how much we would raise, but other states that have gone this route in terms of a limited, it's an existing game, and we're using that veterans design and marketing over it. Washington, Illinois, West Virginia, I think we can expect to raise $500,000 to $1 million to drive into this area for good work. And every little bit counts, knowing what we're going to face in terms of federal sequestration at the national level. And the needs will not go away. We are preaching to the choir of this committee in terms of what our veterans and military families face. And this is a small way for Oregonians to give back. So very supportive, and thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions, maybe after Paul's pitch.
Thank you.
Chair Matthews, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Paul Evans. I live at 744 Main Street East, Monmouth, Oregon, the great metropolis. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. First of all, it's just good to see Representative Matthews where you're at. I've been watching from afar, watching from the classroom how this committee's already been doing a lot of good work in the short time you've had. As far as the book goes, it's really more of a background for a number of the issues that I'm hoping to talk about today and at some other times in the future. The bottom line is that there is a situation coming that we really, in Oregon, have been working on for some time. As you know, you've been up to your elbows in making those things happen. But at the end of the day, words and programs and good thoughts can only go so far. You need money to do things. And the bottom line is that I can't look into a crystal ball and tell you what's going to happen with sequestration or federal funds. What I can tell you is, as a teacher who has taught veterans history for the last 5 years, I can tell you that every time there's been a major buildup in the military and there's a major war, that at the end of that war, people's attitudes change and the veterans programming and the dollars associated therein go away every time. And this particular war has been fought differently than every war before it in terms of how we both have factored out a lot of the jobs and skills that we used to put in the military. We've contracted those out, so now we're training perfect, wonderfully ready to go anywhere in the world killers, but we're not training cooks, we're not training drivers, we're not training a lot of things we used to train for the workforce, which is going to make reintegration more difficult. We're also, because we've fought this war with the same group of guys, he's done 3, I did 3, the average I think now is 4 or 5. The kids coming back, you got about 18 to 24 months to get them on the right track going up, or they're going to go on the wrong track going down, and we're either going to pay now a little bit, or we're going to pay a whole lot more over time. It's just the fact of the matter. And you guys have been great, you guys and gals have been great advocates and ambassadors. But we need this bill to pass. In fact, we probably need more than this bill to pass, but it's a good symbolic start. And the fact of the matter is, right now in Congress, it is a polar opposite of what is going on here in Oregon. Back there, R's and D's can't decide on what day it is. From the beginning of the task force, from the beginning of the work of the last 5 years, it has been an R&D process through and through. This issue in Oregon is not partisan. It's the right thing to do. And I understand last time we were here, in fact, during the the little mini session that we had, we talked about this very issue. And when it comes to lottery dollars, I know there's some legitimate concerns about A, it potentially drying up, and B, you being responsible for theoretically making an addiction worse. I get those things, but when you're up to your behind in alligators, you need to remember you went to the swamp to drain it. We can't let the little things get in the way. We need the cash to get the programs in place, or we will be looking back wishing we had. Again, I appreciate everything you have done so far. I could not talk about this in stronger possible terms in terms of being in favor of it. I think it's a great first step, and ultimately the programs that we're going to come back and talk about in a little bit are directly related to the ability to have a foundation of sustainable, reliable funds for veterans programming. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd love to try to answer them.
Thanks so much for your testimony, both of you, and thanks for being here. The committee does have some questions. Representative Escobar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree on going across the street. I just disagree with the way we're getting across the street. I think we should put this out on the ballot and let the people decide whether we should allocate 1% of the lottery funds toward our veterans on an ongoing basis forever, because what this thing, I look at this and I think it's an up and a down deal. Because when the war is all over, it's going to drop off. And where if we allocated a certain percentage, and I know the people of Oregon would do this, I just know they would, then it would continue to go on forever, perpetually.
If you want to respond to that, absolutely.
Chair Matthews, Representative Esqual, I think you're right. I mean, I absolutely agree that it's a cyclical nature. There's two fundamental truths having to do with the way we fought this war that is really a model for the future. And before I get to that, I would absolutely agree with you if you want to go 1 or even 2% of the lottery, which I know is not the purpose of this bill, and I don't want to put any agencies at risk, but I'm a private citizen, so I'll say it out loud. 2 to 5% is fine with me, because ultimately it will help us reach out to that $4 billion that's currently waiting because of the 280,000 veterans we haven't gotten involved in the system, not just from this war, but from wars going back. Now, back to the way we fought this war. We have fundamentally changed the way in which we go to war. We will never have a conscription or a draft again, period. Won't happen. We will never, ever have a situation where we have, because of our budgetary constraints, we will never have the size of military that we used to have. We have now made a decision, largely, I think, not to our benefit, but we've made a decision to put even more money into technology for unmanned aircraft, unmanned ships, unmanned weaponry. So what we can predict down the future is there's going to be a mainlining, or at least a relative fixed number of troops that we're going to have over time. The problem is, and this is why I think that access to a sustainable funding is important, whereas we used to have a tooth-to-tail ratio of 10 to 1, 9 to 1 of supporters to trigger pullers like we did in previous wars, we've gotten it now down to 3 or 4 to 1, which means we're contracting out everything that isn't combat related, and in fact, in some cases, in illegal ways, we are in fact contracting out combat services. So the fact of the matter is that we're going to have troops that go in, largely it's going to be a static size force, but when the guys and gals get out, they're going to be coming from a very, very military environment to a non-military environment. They're still going to need those reintegration services. They're still going to need access to housing. They're still going to need access to what will probably be an even more remote system of VA, as you alluded to, because the World War II generation, as they start to pass off, VA has been making investments in a lot more remote type servicing. Those require dollars and infrastructure because, as you know, the state of Oregon doesn't have a large veterans complex or a large military complex upon which to draw. So 2% over time, 1%, these funds, as long as the monies are available, once they're no longer needed and there's no more wars, I would be happy to help undo this particular law. But I think there's going to be a lot of need over the next 20, 40, or 60 years.
And I think not necessarily a tension between one targeted scratch it initiative or a raffle initiative, and if it got subsumed into a larger percentage allocation, whether out of the legislature or a vote of the people, it would just get subsumed into that larger effort. So not necessarily at tension.
Thank you for your point, Representative. Representative Fagan.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing? So I definitely agree that we need a source of stable funding. I personally have just a lot of trouble with the lottery, kind of an expansion of the lottery being the way that we go about that. In fact, just this week, the stats came out for kind of your typical lottery player, and it's a woman about age 47 who makes under $35,000 a year. And I'm uncomfortable with the prospect of trying to raise more funds when that's kind of the person that we're raising it from. I wish instead that we were, because as you are aware, you can pretty much justify anything as long as you're doing it for veterans, because people love veterans. You guys have considerable political capital, and I wish that we were here on something that maybe, you know, would be harder for people to support if it's a tax or a fee or a fund from somebody who can afford it, as opposed to this 47-year-old woman who makes $35,000 a year. So I very much support finding. That's why I was happy to support kind of a $5 per document fee for the homeless veteran services, and that's a fee that would not get unanimous support if it was not for veterans. So you have a significant political capital, and I'd love to see us try and find a stable fund somewhere else as opposed to expanding the Oregon lottery, because the people that are playing, the average person really can't afford to be playing.
Chair Matthews, Representative Fagan. First of all, I would love to be here having other options than the lottery. When I was Senior Policy Advisor, I fought and lost multiple times for general fund. I fought and lost for fee-based approaches, fought and lost for every other thing, and was told we had to go find somewhere that wasn't general fund and wasn't, I mean, quite frankly, was lottery and everything else but name. Having said that, I am absolutely for some solutions that probably wouldn't have bipartisan support. I'm for putting every family that didn't have family members in the military for a war tax and actually paying for the war that we didn't pay and we put on a credit card. I'm for
Well, that'll
actually
be popular, Paul.
reallocating.
Careful what doors you open.
I'm actually for reallocating and having a legal definition of what economic development is, because for every dollar that we put into veterans, we can get about $1,017 back. So we can actually argue it that way, that lottery aside, other economic development funds could be open to it. Whichever, if you want a square, we'll build you a square. You want a triangle, we'll build a triangle. You want a circle, we'll build a circle. But the bottom line is, we've got kids coming back that have not the same type of opportunities they had before because of the way we've chosen to fight this war. They've been in the crucible longer, for more often. We are already seeing suicides at 22 veterans a day, and I've been beating the drum for a couple of years. This is the tsunami we've been talking about, and the window is closing. So I'm open to anything up to and probably beyond what you would probably be comfortable with. But we have to act now, because we do not have the luxury of time. We've run the clock out. And the kids, I mean, sequestration, for just an example, we will be having 40 to 60,000 troops coming off active duty far faster than people thought. The system isn't ready. On top of the 300 to 400 a month in Oregon that we're having just as through normal attrition. And these guys and gals need the kinds of help that we didn't really need to provide a decade and a half ago. So I like what you're thinking, and just tell us what you want us to do.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments and your passion on the issues. I really do. Representative Esquivel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I don't understand this, but I think I do. We aren't expanding the lottery. We're just taking proceeds from the lottery. Example, the thing that I just said, maybe 1 or 2%, or you'd like to have 10%, I know, but
Yes. That's a good start.
Realistically, Paul, it would not have anything to do with the expansion of any program. It would be the net proceeds to be divvied up to us, and I think that's the ticket.
So Chair Matthews, Representative Esquivel, last session when this came first forward, it got tied up in some of the marketing that the lottery had been doing around the orcade, and whether they were marketing to youth, and whether are we targeting marketing, and whether this was an expansion. It was written pretty broadly. For the bill before us today, I don't think you can classify it as an expansion of lottery. Instead of an existing scratch it or raffle, this one would be run instead on an existing game, not a new game in terms of format or structure. Whereas the larger effort that I think you're talking about in terms of a percentage would just be, here's what lottery collects through all of their initiatives, and then a slice of that pie comes out.
Thank you for that. Representative Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just from my experience, I've been doing this for a long time too, and known Paul to be here for a long time. But in 2001, I believe it is, nobody's countered me yet, the voters of Oregon voted to bond to the tune of $2.1 billion to seismically upgrade our public buildings. We still have not done that, so we do have a bill in this time to try to address that. But my point is that I think there's nothing wrong with going to a vote of the people, but I don't think you could, it takes a long time to get it on the ballot. And like you said, there's not a lot of time. About an hour ago, there were, I don't know how many, but it looked like about 40 or 50 troops, mobilization ceremony up in the Senate of people going off to Afghanistan and Kosovo now. I think they're a medical team. And they're going to be gone for 9 months. So in 9 months, they could be doing this, but I think it would take longer than 9 months to get something like this on the ballot, and then it has to go forward a bit. But anyway, I see this as, we've been working on this for a long time, and Paul's absolutely right. You were told, come back with other options, I know what it's like to get money, or I know what it's like to try to get money out of the Ways and Means process. So sometimes you get lucky, but I think that this is a kind of an opportunity for us. And I know we were talking about gray whale license plates today. I mean, not every one of you would buy a gray whale license plate. Some will buy other license plates or just take what they give you. But people who are interested in it will do it. I don't win the lottery, but it's because I probably don't buy any tickets. But I would buy these tickets. And and even if I won, I would give it to you guys, so. So I think, that's just my 2 cents. I think that's a sense of urgency, and I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. And we are in a public hearing. I
I know.
appreciate that.
I'm just
And thank you
pushing
so
you along,
much,
yeah.
Representative Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cameron, Paul pointed out that we've discussed this in years and hearings past, and I've always liked to believe, and I don't know the psyche of the lottery ticket buyer, but I would like to think that, like Cameron said, maybe he doesn't buy them now, but for this, he may put $10 down and buy a scratch it or something like that. So I support both concepts. I support this concept, and to Representative Esquivel, there actually is a bill out there, and I don't know if I want to speak for Representative Parrish, but I've signed on to a bill that does, and I think it's 5% of the lottery that it would set aside, and so I've signed on. I support that, and that would send the question to the voters. And Representative Boone's right. It takes longer than it'd be nice to have, but as a disabled veteran, I know that 9 months from now, 9 years from now, I'm gonna hopefully I'm here. Mitch is going to help me, and Tom. Hopefully, there will be some resources. As I get older, my needs are going to get greater, and so I don't think it's something that we have to look at. We need the money. I mean, Paul's been working on this a long time. Cameron's been a lot of us have been working on it a long time. As long as we keep working on it, 20 years from now, we're going to have a lot of veterans that still have a lot of needs.
Good. And what I would say is you're exactly right. There are 2 bills out there. Representative Parrish has a bill. There's 41 signatures from the House that I believe are on that bill. I don't know where that bill's been assigned yet. I don't believe it has. I'll be meeting with the Speaker today. And it does request a vote of the people to determine whether or not 5% of the lottery draws. And I can tell you, I think there's going to be some challenges with that, although I'm supportive. And I think the challenge is the bar's pretty high in competition with everything else. But the reality is, this particular bill is about a scratch-it game that has a military theme that goes specifically for a cause. And it is not competing against the other games. It's simply not in addition to the games currently, but it's just one of the 2 tickets or, 7 tickets in the case. And I do think that folks would like to support the military. And for me personally, if these are entertainment dollars with respect to the 47-year-old single mother, I don't know how we've determined if that's the video poker player or if that's the lottery scratch-it player. And I think there's probably a difference in the demographics. But we'll hear some from the Lottery Commission. I do appreciate your time today, and I hope you both stick around. I know you have vested interest in the next bill as well, which is the Campus Veteran Service Officers, and we plan on moving a couple things that you're interested in and been working hard on. So thanks again, and great to see you, Paul, and thanks for being here, and appreciate your testimony. Thank you. And with that, I will call up Jody Weiser, please.
For the record, I'm Jody Weiser with Tax Fairness Oregon. I think your discussion actually covered almost all the points except one in what I had written, because the goal is laudable, but the mechanism isn't, and it's really just taking a piece of the lottery. It's hopefully it's not going to get more people addicted to the lottery, and I think that's the fear, that earmarking it. And if you play this, we'll get some people who are actually quite vulnerable coming back from places. They're at a vulnerable place. We don't really want to encourage them to play the lottery and become addicted to the lottery. And I think it's a vulnerable time to do that. And so I was thinking I would be much more comfortable just saying, let's take a piece of the lottery. And then I hear you have a bill like that. But another idea I had was, why don't we do something that's totally unrelated to, I mean, there's no way to find an idea that's related aside from those of us who haven't sent a family member away, which is really a very logical thing to do, to say that we should be paying something. But we have Christmas trees. We sell them all over the place. What if we put $1 charge on every Christmas tree? That would be a pile of money, and it would be dispersed across a broad segment of the population in the country, and we send Christmas trees to all those places. And it's not related, but neither is the lottery. And so it just seemed like a simpler way to do it that doesn't feel addictive. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you for your time today. And we'll bring up next Larry Niswinder, please, from the lottery. And thank you very much for being here, sir. We've seen you before on this particular issue, and always appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Chair Matthews and committee members. For the record, Larry Niswinder, Director of the Oregon Lottery. I will keep my testimony very brief today because we have had this discussion one other time in the short session, as Paul mentioned. This is, lottery is officially neutral on this bill. That's just the charge that we walk into these arenas with, but it is a very worthwhile proposal, as you've already heard testimony to support. All I'm really here to do is just give you some background policy considerations and then answer any questions you may have. It's in their testimony, there's just a couple things that, just so realistic expectations are set. The success of various games, whether they're scratch-its or raffles, it does vary. And some of the veteran-themed games that have been played in other states do vary. And it's not saying they wouldn't be successful in Oregon. If you pass this bill and the lottery is called to do this, we will do our best to make it as successful as possible to drive the revenue you're expecting. It's just that some of the research we've done shows that the success does vary depending on the state and the methodology. To date, we have had, I think, 10 different raffles, and all of them have sold out. And so you will see in my testimony that those do derive approximately $1.2 million per raffle ticket. So we've had really good success with that. Some states do not have success with raffles, and they've discontinued them when they find that they don't continue to sell out. We're on a track where we've got 2 a year. We would pick one of those 2 if you pass this, or some scratch-it-themed game, and we would sell them. So to Representative Esquivel's earlier comments, he's correct. It wouldn't call for expansion of gaming. We would take from our existing portfolio of games, and we would dedicate the proceeds from one of those games, the net proceeds, to this fund source. So that being clear, it's just a little bit of uncertainty around the net proceeds that would be derived, and I know that the policy makers and the program folks would be hoping to have some stability in that, and to our best of our ability, we would try to provide that. In terms of a policy question before you, is the clearer you can be in the record and in this bill, if it passes out, what criteria you would apply to dedicating revenue to a source, in this case, the veterans' education, job development, and training. It helps because in other states where they've had a good cause singled out to dedicate revenues for, then there's always a follow-on of, well, what other good cause do we want to continue to make this slice to? And currently, lottery doesn't have any games that we offer that have dedicated funding recipients. We transfer those proceeds on a quarterly basis. They get transferred through the constitutional provisions, the statutory provisions, and then the legislature and Ways and Means determines the rest with the governor's support. So that's how it happens today. So that's just a policy issue. The clearer you can be about the criteria you would apply would help avoid some of the issues that other states have experienced, where one time this happens and the next time there's another good cause that it comes to, and then you have where do you draw the line? Just a policy consideration for you to think about. So with that, to just follow on to some of the comments earlier made, just to inform the committee, 1% dedication of lottery proceeds is $10 million a year. Right. $10 million a biennium, excuse me, because that's what we provide right now to the Problem Gambling Treatment Fund, and it's approximately $10 million per biennium. With that, I will conclude. There is testimony toward the back of my comments that really is just giving you kind of just an little insight in terms of what might be have to be referenced in Ways and Means, where they take up how does this play through in the budget world. But I really don't think it's necessary to talk about them here today unless you wish to have me do so.
No, I don't think that's necessary today, but thank you so much for your testimony and coming to the committee again and your approach to this. As you know, I mean, I believe you're spot on in terms of what we would say on the record to assist us in what our true intent would be in this bill. And you'll notice it's just in public hearing today because there are some things we need to work out in massaging through this process. So with that, Vice Chair Fagan.
So does the lottery have stats that there's a dramatically different person or income that plays scratch-its versus video poker or video games?
Chair Matthews and Representative Fagan, Not that I am aware of. What I've shared with the committee and what's in our tracking studies does give an overall profile that fits exactly what you described. 51% are women, 49% men, average income $35,000 a year with some college. That's kind of a general statement about the player profile. I don't have a delineation, but if we have one, I'll get it to the committee.
And so an additional question, in this bill, it's saying to establish a game. Is there a difference? I've never read the statutes that authorized video machines, but is there a distinction between a lottery game and, say, video poker, or are those all considered games?
I think we don't really have any, the statute, I didn't really look at it that closely, but it really talked about, I believe, just traditional games versus video, and I think there's separate laws that deal with video games. So, but if the committee wished to change that or be clear about that, in the video world, it's we have, as you know, up to 6 terminals in locations, and they have, based on the software needs, up to maybe 12 games per terminal, and so it would be a little harder right now under our current technology to actually isolate some of the per game net proceeds. But if that was the wish of the committee, that could be explored.
Sure.
I think the reason I was asking was because all that's been talked about is kind of a,